All right, welcome back, baseball fans. 70-73 Carryover League draft continues. We are in the 5th round, and by 5th round, finally, we've gotten every team's 1st through 4th pick from a unique year in 70, 71, 72, or 73. Now, every team will have to take a player from the year of 1973. So the record we look at is this record right here, 7302, the second pick from the 73 box as the 5th round pick for each record. Now, some of these guys have already been chosen when a team had the rights to a guy and they announced earlier in the draft they would take him in this 5th round. So we won't actually have 32, so this might go a little bit quicker than the previous ones. First pick in the 5th round, Cleveland takes Tom Hilgendorf. Nice little reliever, 94 innings, .129 whip, 3.14 ERA. They've created a nice little problem on their team. They have 3 left-handed relievers and no left-handed starters, but their work is not done. They'll be on the phones. Someone will make a deal for either Hilgendorf, Mingori, or Denny Riddleberger later in this draft. Colorado, they took Al Fitzmaurice, a nice card, 2.83 ERA in 89 innings in 1973, and actually that's a nice, solid pick for the Rockies, getting a player who came out of Kansas City system. All right, 7302 again. You have Toronto keeping Carl Taylor. He hit 340 last year in 69. That, of course, was an aberration. But they ran that card for 4 years and helped the Blue Jays be competitive. The reality of Carl Taylor is not what it was, but at least they got him in this year with a 363 on base percentage. And he walks a ton, so they'll bat him second just to get on base and hopefully help the team get some runs. All right, the Cubs. Actually, Del Unser is the pick, but he was taken, we know, in the last round. When he was announced in the last round when Burris was selected. All right, the Padres take the 1973 Randy Jones. It's kind of in reaction to the Expos selecting Steve Rogers in the 1st round. The Padres figured they needed to get their franchise face pitcher on the roster in the same draft. So they waited, and now they got Randy Jones, 139 innings, actually pitched about the same number, a couple more starts than Rogers had. Rogers had a better ERA, but it's Randy Jones, Steve Rogers. Good news for expansion teams in this era. All right, Toby Harrah. Yes, finally. After coming up probably too early and not playing very well, they finally believe his 73 card is good enough to start. 260 hitter, 338 short with some speed. He will get better, but they need to get him up, get him started, and if you want to bump him up to one of his better cards, you can in future years, future drafts. All right, Atlanta announced George Stone in a previous round of the draft, and Milwaukee announced Darrell Porter the same way, and Ohio announced Dan Driesen the same way. So we'll just keep rolling. The Arizona Diamondbacks have technically finished their draft. That's right, they're done. They took Chris Arnold to be a second base, third base utility guy with batting average 296, something we talk about Arizona having. And they can sit down and relax and consider options for the token round of the draft. This is a team that's just been very smart with their picks. And they announced their 6th, 7th, and 8th round picks earlier in the draft because they had the token round of the draft in 72. So they announced the token round pick is their 6th round pick technically, and they already announced their 7th and 8th round picks earlier. All right, the Expos did not, they announced Ron Fairley earlier in the draft. We'll skip that. The Cardinals, they needed a shortstop who could field. So they have Dwayne Anderson, who can hit pretty decently, and they have Mike Tyson, who's a 3. Again, this is an era where you're just not going to find superstar shortstops falling out of the woodwork. So Mike Tyson's fine for this era. It's his best year at the beginning of his career. He has a nice year in 76. All right, next up, Florida. They needed some defense and a fourth outfielder. They picked up Luis Melendez, 23 years old. Decent range and not many errors. 267 hitter, and he's only 23 years old. He can help the Marlins. The White Sox. Okay, it's a kind of a fun move. They had the rights to Tony Muser coming up in their system. It's Tony Muser's best year, known as a slick fielding first baseman, but more of a lighter bat, not much power. And they decided to bring him up because they needed a lefty bat, one. And number two, they said, let's put Dick Allen at DH, even though Dick Allen could field fine, but Muser's better. So, yeah, they got Muser at his peak in 73. Nice move for the White Sox. Had a nice draft. All right, the Pirates announced Jim Rooker earlier. The Mariners announced Fred Norman earlier. Philadelphia announced Mac Scarse earlier. Okay, here's a great pick. New York Yankees improve Thurman Munson. And, cost him a pick because they could have waited a year, but they said, no, let's get him into a 73 card now. Look, the only controversy, he has a -4 arm in 1970, which is a little ridiculous, first of all. But he still has a -3 arm. And in 73 is his best year with power. He has 20 homers, 29 doubles. He's got a 849 OPS. This is going to be the highest OPS he has, preceding an MVP and 3 trips to the World Series. So you could argue that 73 Munson is the best Munson. And they just said, let's do it now. I mean, the Orioles and the Red Sox aren't getting any worse. So let's just pump this Yankee thing up. They're having a good draft. All right. Okay, Portland got a nice player here and a player away from another organization. They had the rights to Nelson Briles. He had 3-4 straight lackluster years until the year of 73, this year, where he has a 2.84 ERA and pitches on 3 days rest. Did it with the Pirates in 73. So it's good news for the rest of the National League that Portland gets a Pirate player away from the Pirates. Good news for the Cincinnati Reds. You can look at it that way as well. Expansion teams need all their help. So finally, this is probably the best pick, I would say. Well, Corbin was a nice pick. Briles is a nice pick. Coggins is a little bit of a reach. He's a 319 hitter with one big year. All right, the Twins selected Jim Holt, 297 hitter, to play first base and center field. He's an upgrade on their Joe Haig, who they're thinking of cutting in the token round of the draft. Holt is a better left-handed hitter. They needed a left-handed bat. They were right-handed heavy. After Tony Leva and Rod Carew, Holt would be the third best lefty on the team. All right, Las Vegas. They dipped into Ron Hodges' pool. Ron's a left-handed hitting catcher with a -1 arm. He just doesn't have power. It's 260. Wish he had power, but he doesn't. Oh well. Can't have everything. Again, a left-handed hitting catcher with a -1 arm. He joins Jeff Torborg and John Boccabella as all catchers. Boccabella will be moved to first base. He can actually field first base better than catcher. All right. Kansas City, finally. After going hitting heavy earlier in the draft, they used back-to-back picks to take pitchers. Bill Butler last round, and now Doug Bird, one of his best relief years for Kansas City, in 102 innings, had a 108 whip. And they are building back the pitching staff. They lost some guys. They don't have Splittorff in this era. Toronto scooped Splittorff up, so they have to trade back for him. They don't have Dennis Leonard yet. Steve Busby's not really that good yet. Larry Gurr is still in the Cubs. So the Royals, their pitching will be under question in this roster construction. Their offense is great. They're relying on Mike Heedland and Roger Nelson, who are very good pitchers. They just didn't have a long career. So hopefully, once those guys' careers are over, Leonard, Gurr, Splittorff will be available. Houston. Nice little future pick for now. They already had a shortstop, Dennis Mankey, and they have Joe Morgan at second, and they have Doug Rader at third. They took Roger Metzger, his best offensive year, coupled with a Gold Glove and a 1/14 at short, which means Menke can now move around to DH, second base, third base, or first base. So, and again, Metzger doesn't even have to play. He could just be a defensive replacement late in the game for a little bit, even though he has 637 plate appearances. You'd think he'd be an everyday shortstop, but for Houston, that's good. They got lots of talent in Houston. Good for them. All right, Baltimore announced Al Bunbury earlier in the draft. Oakland, oh boy, folks. The rest of the American League continues to cringe as what Oakland is doing with this gold medal roster. After bringing back Bando, Green, Holtzman, and Jackson, improving Joe Rudy, they decided, well, let's improve Raleigh Fingers too. So they're just reading the dynasty script that was written and saying, let's get the dynasty players, but make them all better. So Bando's 70, Green 71 before the World Series, Holtzman and Jackson during their World Series, and Fingers and Rudy their best years. If this doesn't work, they'll have next year, they'll have to move Bando. The year after that, they'll have to move Green. So they still can run this thing back 2 or 3 years in the dynasty era. The Dodgers announced Willie Crawford in an earlier round. We'll skip that. All right, the Angels, good for them. They have had a lackluster draft, to say the least. But they found a diamond in the rough. They have Richie Scheinblum, a short sample guy in 1973. Wasn't sure they could fit all these outfielders on their team. They've got a glut. They've got Johnstone, Baylor, Mickey Rivers, and Alex Johnson. But they're going to have Baylor and Rivers platoon. Johnson's going to be DH, which opens up a spot for Richie Scheinblum. They certainly need a stick in California. And so Scheinblum and Valentine are the 1973 players, both with sticks. Batting averages are comparable regarding the BP, best player available. So you could still argue that Valentine is still a better player available than Scheinblum, even though Scheinblum's got a better batting average because Valentine is going to be playing shortstop. All right, good news for the Angels. They needed that. They were starting to fade with Seattle and Texas rising. All right, finally, the Cincinnati Reds, who were just boring everybody to death in this draft by doing what everybody thought they were going to do, finally decided to take a left turn. So they went with Rose and May and Granger and Concepcion. What they discovered in 1973 was to pump the brakes on Cesar Geronimo, wait a year, he hits better. Pump the brakes on Bill Bonham, he's not quite good enough to get in the rotation. Do the same with Bourbon. Bourbon statistically in 73 has a great one-loss record in ERA, but gives up too many hits. And they realized that his 72 is better than his 73. They could have improved Tommy Helm's batting average, but his defense got worse, and improving Carbo's on base percentage, but his power gets worse. So, after all that is said and done, and kind of being stuck in nowhere land, and now starting to think maybe we should have taken Pete Rose's 1973 MVP card instead of the 70 card, but I still like the 70 Rose card better than the 73 card for now. After all that, they addressed backup catcher to Johnny Bench by taking one of the first retired players, calling a guy out of retirement. Ken Suarez actually is decent. He hits 248 in this year, but he'll be a platoon back up the bench. He won't actually play. He'll play designated hitter against left-handed pitching. He replaces Don Pavlitek, who had that same role last year. This is how you get Johnny Bench's backup. You make him be your DH against lefties. And the DH against righties will come in one of the later rounds, and he'll have a great stick. They're still going to add Bourbon and Bosman, but in later rounds. Don't fret, Reds fans. You got to be conservative here. You already are a star-laden team. Don't reach for craziness, which is why having Geronimo wouldn't have made a lot of sense. You already have so much talent in your outfield, and Geronimo's redundant. Wait till Bobby Tolan goes away, and then just plug Geronimo into center field. All right, finally, the Giants announced that Tito Fuentes is their 5th round pick. Basically, he's the same guy every year from 70 to 73. Of course, his defense is 73. A 2E6 a second, 3E16 a third. That's pretty cool. 731 plate appearances. Dude wants to play. He can move to second. Ron Hunt can move to third if they want to do that. Giants, nice, smart pick. And it also, what this does though, it keeps the Gary Maddoxes and the Ed Goodsons and the Gary Thomasons and the Randy Moffats in the minor leagues for another year. So they're keeping their farm system fertile for future drafts. Boston, with the 30th pick of the 5th round, took a guy who was actually in Major League Baseball in the 60s, and he did not appear with a 69 or 70 or 71 card, or 72 card for that matter. And suddenly, a very late blooming carryover league rookie, 34-year-old Bobby Bolin, somehow figured something out late in career, had a 2.70 ERA and a 1.08 whip, and he will go into that Boston bullpen. Boston is just very clever. If you can manipulate an 8-man rotation and make it plus in all 8 areas, you know you're going to have the offense. And there's no reason to think that you can't beat the Orioles and the Yankees. So Boston, smart, smart, smart every round. All right. Detroit, in an earlier round, announced that Dick McAuliffe would be their pick here. And finally, with the last pick of the 5th round, the New York Mets, this is an okay pick, but again, you're just checking off boxes here. They had to address a 4th infielder with Wayne Garrett, Bobby Heiss, and Bud Harrelson. It's not flashy. It's Ted Martinez. He can start this year at second base. Next year, he can move into a utility spot once Bobby Heiss and Wayne Garrett disappear, which he's probably he's better suited to be a utility guy, frankly, than a starter. But no big deal, because he's a 3 at second and third, but late in games, Bobby Heiss and Wayne Garrett are 2 at second and third, so they'll be the end of game replacements. He also technically is Bud Harrelson's injury replacement. So that's it for the 5th round of the 1970-73 Summer Carryover League. Thanks for checking it out. We'll see you next time.